So I'm Freja Thoresen, and as he said, I'll be talking about using an unsupervised approach for clustering of the Moon mineral mapper spectral data, also named MCube. So here is a brief overview of the resources we might be interested on the Moon for in situ resource utilization. In no particular order, one material we might be interested in is silicon, which can be used for semiconductors or solar cells. There's also the rare earth elements creep, highly conductive metals. Of course, there's titanium as well, which can be found in ilmenite, also with oxygen and iron. And we have aluminum, which is used for almost everything, sturdy material used in medical devices, electrical components, and building material, etc. And then we also have water, a really nice talk also a few minutes ago. This is deposited at the poles, but it can also be from space weathering effects. And lastly, there's the precious metals, which is platinum group elements, can be used for conductors, and it's non-reactive and ideal for electronics. So other than the resources we might be interested in, I also tried to create a family portrait of lunar mineral maps. Now this one is not complete. There are many other mineral maps out there. I just want to give a brief overview here. So the first one here is from Elrock. Here we have a mosaic of the Mer Oriental. And all of the other maps I'll be showing here is also of the exact same location in latitude and longitude as you'll see in this one. And here we also see the titanium mineral map. Then we have the lunar prospector. Here we have iron and titanium again, and hydrogen and thorium. We have clementine. They had a really nice color map here with different ratios of the different wavelengths. And we have iron oxide as well. Here we have the Moon mineral mapper MCube. This is the 1 and 2 micron band depths. And lastly listed here is the Kaguya, where we have autopyroxene, olivine, iron oxide again, and clinopyroxene and plagioclase. So all of these mineral maps are taken from QuickMap. So that's what the selection was based on. So looking at all of these different maps from these wonderful instruments, some questions might arise. For example, what are the dominant spectral features? What can we conclude from all of these maps? And are there locations that have similar mineral compositions? So in order to attempt to answer these questions, I made this overview of the different instruments that we have. On the y-axis is the spatial scale, and on the x-axis you see the spectral wavelengths. So the idea here is to have something with a good spatial scale and also broad wavelength with spectrum. So for this reason, we chose to use the Moon mineral mapper. You might notice here as well that actually the IIRS has a better spatial scale and also broader spectral wavelengths, but at the time this analysis was initiated, it was not fully published. So that's why we went with the Moon mineral mapper. So the methods I'll go through here, a step at a time. Here we have the input data. So the full input data is actually 85 wavelengths. We're using 71 in this analysis. So each of these images, of course, has the wavelength dimension. And in this image here, each spectral line is 1 pixel in the image. Then we're passing it through a neural network. This neural network is called an autoencoder. Autoencoders works the way that it compresses the data into a lower dimension, and then it reconstructs the data again. So the idea of using an autoencoder usually can be used for denoising of data sets, but it can also be used to extract features. And the reason why it's really good at extracting features is that when you're compressing the data into a lower dimension, you can reconstruct the full data set using this lower dimension. So you'll know that these lower dimensional variables actually contain the most essential information of the data set. And these variables are called the latent variables. Those are the ones I put a box on, like right in the center of the neural network. And at the very right of the image, you'll see that's how the training works. The training works by actually passing the input data through the network and then seeing the difference between the reconstructed data at the end of the neural network and the input data. So to further analyze the data, then we actually extract these latent variables, so these lower dimensional variables. Here you can see you'll have only, instead of having, for example, the 70-something input data elements, you'll have just 3, in this case, latent variables. And then we cluster these latent variables. And in the end, we'll end up with this sort of clustered image of the data. So for training the network, we chose 20 images based on particular interest. So this means looking at other published mineral maps and choosing the ones with a high weight percentage, because we want to make sure that we're sampling all of the really important stuff in there. And then the rest of the 80 images were chosen at random. A bit more detail about the network here as well. Input size is the number of wavelengths. We have convolutional layers. Convolutional layers, they decrease the features of the data while increasing the kernels in the layers. So the way it works again is that in the encoder part, we compress the data, and in the decoder part, we reconstruct the data again. This is the resulting, we call it the moon spectral feature map. In order to best see the colors, I suspect you might use the screens on the side. But here we see that we have these 5 clusters, so 5 different categories of this data set. The categories are defined by k-means algorithm. The white areas in this image is no data, and the black areas, they have a spectrum close to 0, so basically a flat signal along in the different wavelengths. So what we can also do from this spectral feature map is then to extract the reflectance data again. So we always know exactly where the data is coming from. Here we have, for the 5 different clusters, we have the average spectra for the 5 different clusters. So if we have a look at cluster 3 here, cluster 3 is the one that is in the mare-like regions, gray or maybe more white on the slides here. It has the lowest reflectance. We also see even lower reflectances at the poles because of less illumination can affect the data, of course. And cluster 5 has the highest reflectance, and this can be attributed to being highlands-like data. Cluster 5 here is the yellow cluster. To further analyze the spectra from these 5 clusters, we also look at the normalized continuum removed spectra. So here it's important to know, since it's normalized, we're actually mostly interested in the relative absorption between band 1 and band 2, since they all will go between 0 and 1 in this case. A bit closer look here, so it should be easier to see, except for the gray one, but then again, you'll have to look at the screens on the side. So for cluster 1, we see that it has a relatively deeper minimum at band 1 compared to band 2. And this can be attributed to autopyroxenes and linopyroxenes. We see at cluster 2 a stronger absorption at band 2, and it may be because of contribution of spinel, but we cannot be sure. For cluster 3, this is the mare-like cluster. It may be difficult to see here in the slide, but the band center at band 1, or the center of band 1, is shifted to the right compared to cluster 1 and 2. And this may be attributed to a larger content of olivine, since it has dominant absorption features around 1.05 microns. For cluster 4 and 5, we see a greater relative absorption at band 2 compared to band 1. And this can be a contribution of plagioclase. It sort of flattens out this absorption peak in quotation marks by the pyroxene absorptions. So we also made a comparison to other mineral maps to see if these clusters actually, thank you, if these clusters they actually correspond to what is already published out there. So these are the Kaguya maps. You'll see in these reddish colors is the olivine, and in the bluish colors is the clinopyroxenes. And the weight percentages has been filtered to be the highest weight percentages in this case. So you see that it aligns quite nicely with cluster 1, 2, and 3. And we also have for the plagioclase from Kaguya here on the right-hand side, and we have cluster 4 and 5 on the left-hand side. So to conclude here, we're using this new unsupervised learning algorithm to cluster spectra from the Moon Mineral Mapper, MCube. This works as a sort of proof of concept of a new method we can use for hyperspectral analysis of lunar images. These results, we present a new moon spectral feature map showing the locations of 5 clusters of mixed spectral features. And these clusters are analyzed through spectral analysis and comparisons with published maps. We hope to contribute, of course, to an understanding of the lunar mineralogical distribution, enhancing our knowledge of the moon's geology. Furthermore, I also want to highlight what you could do as improvements or further work. So this clustering is based only on the purely on the spectral data without using any spatial or neighboring pixel information. So that might be used in the future, or merging data from multiple instruments would be interesting as well. And applying this method to other hyperspectral data sets. And we also have a paper under review, so hopefully you'll be able to read about these results soon. Thank you for your attention. Okay.
Thank you, Freja. A very nice and interesting presentation. Any questions? You have one question there.
Thanks for the presentation. The question is that, in the comparison that you have made, you have provided the global perspectives. Have you also made any local scale, regional scale comparisons between the existing mineral maps and what you have got?
Since the clustering was made on a global scale, we only did comparisons to global maps, but in the paper we go into more detail from more like the spectral analysis features. Going from the spectral analysis perspective instead. So actually using some of these spectral lines I showed in the figure, we have more figures going into more detail showing like the band depth centers and also the depths of the absorptions as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question? Well, there. Yeah.
I was wondering about the number of clusters. Could you explain a little bit more about how you find the optimal number of clusters?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the number of clusters, of course, you could also argue, for example, using 2 to actually have the mare and highlands features, for example. So just to make clear, there's no exactly correct number of clusters. But the way that we chose it was to optimize the distances between the clusters. So there are measurements that we can use. It's called the silhouette score, where you can calculate which clustering or which amount of clusters actually has the best separation between the clusters. So it is something that we could optimize.